I figured,
There we go.
there we
Yeah,
go.
just in case. You never
Yeah, if
know.
you need to like refer back to it, I don't know how
Yeah.
you guys are doing the transcribing and collating of information, but anyway, so that was like the context, right, of me coming in as a freshman. I think like, when you talk about the conditions, the very first thing that I noticed, I mean, that weekend of welcome was this like culture shock. Oh, there's like issues in the room. It's okay, don't worry.
No,
Um,
sorry, it was just campus safety, smoke, like checking the smoke detectors,
oh,
like,
you're fine.
sorry.
Um, uh so like just like the conditions of, like thinking about my first weekend of welcome, I was like, oh my gosh, where am I? I felt so out of place, like really like just thinking about it from a demographic perspective. And on my floor, I think I was like one of the only Latinas, and so I just you could just feel it. And like that was I only lived my I lived in Pittsburgh, Antioch, 35 minutes away from Moraga, and it just felt like a huge, just different worlds for me, right? And so I think like as I continued to obviously get to know other people and then build relationships with students who were, they're sophomores, juniors, or seniors, getting to like understand what many of them had been like heavily involved in the year before, and then feeling like, okay, that happened, in the spring of 2010. Everybody like either graduated, went home for, like the summer kind of was like nothing happened. And then realizing like the fall when I'm a freshman, nothing really had changed or was like super visible. And so I think that there was this like feeling or notion. Um, I think that students were still talking about it. There was, a core group of staff that were really supportive of students, right? And putting pressure. And so that kind of was I don't know, the foundation of my time there, right? Is like always kind of referring back to this like really like pivotal moment in the time of students and student experiences there. And I think that like kind of diving into the second question of like what was like some of the maybe like larger societal issues happening. Um I'm trying to like contextualize if you guys would even know this reference. Like Occupy Wall Street or like the 99% and like the 1%. So like when I was in college, this is happening on a national scale, right? Like why, 1% of the population has 99% of the wealth, right? And so if you look up like, Occupy Wall Street or the 99 1% movement, you'll see like, what was happening at that national scale almost felt like what was happening at St. Mary's, right? And coming from, my background, immigrant, lower class, like it felt so kind of like in your face, like you can see it, right? Like I wasn't going to Iris, not to use you as an example, I wasn't going to Hawaii on spring break, right? Or whatever it was, like, and so there was this like huge like I think that became like a movement or a source of inspiration. I can't really remember what year, but I just remember we had Occupy SMC. Like, it may have been my sophomore year. I honestly don't really even like remember where in the in the timeline, but it had to have been my freshman or sophomore year. But like we did have Occupy SMC where these issues, were brought to light and how it affected students. And I think that was kind of one of the biggest ones that I like remember as kind of being more tied into like social. I think in my senior year, definitely Black Lives Matter movement was like really big. But it was again these were like things happening at that national level, but it was also like, for us and kind of our microclimate of like what was happening in the experience of students, super, super like relevant. Those were the two that I could say that were more on that like national that I remember. But I guess the third one, and kind of tying into that third question of like what role or what campaigns, the third one, and I think this has always been, a societal issue and really, thinking about um how it affects, so many even families of or parents or families of students is fair labor laws. And so one of the things in the movements that I was like really heavily involved as a leader was the unionization of our cafeteria workers. And so at the time, our Sodexo workers, and I actually fell off of keeping in touch with some of the workers and people have moved, but at the time there was a lot of mismanagement and a lot of complaints by are the people that fed us every day. As far as like not getting paid for overtime, there was a lot of sexual harassment allegations with like management. There was a lot of just like unfair labor laws. And so myself and other students got together with an organization, Unite Here, their local national recognized union for hospitality workers. They unionize cafeteria workers, hotel, like a lot of like kind of like the labor. And so that was one of the campaigns that I was like really, really proud to work on because some of us, I didn't ever work for Sodexo, but some of the students decided to take because you can work as a student, you can work, at Sodexo, and so we had like infiltrated Sodexo as students. So there were students that took on a job just so that they can build relationships with the cafeteria workers. Some of us would just like simple like, oh, hey, how are you? Like, like having lunch, like sitting at the lunch table with them and just like building. And it was something that was done over like 2 years. So it was a big part of my time there. And I helped unionize them, and we got, enough students to rally around this. But at the same time, like you don't want to jeopardize anyone's job. So a lot of this was like kind of undercover. We were like spies. It's the best way that I could describe it. But, finally we decided like, okay, we want to you know, support the we got enough workers to say like they wanted a union, right? Like, and we were able to then walk with them as students. I have an article. I'll share this right after. I have an article of that. But we were able to walk as students, hand uh, shoulder to shoulder with the workers to management and with faculty and with some of the brothers to not only like their management and Sodexo being like a contractor, right? And say like they want to form a union, right? And like having enough workers there, but also we had to put pressure on their employer, and who's their employer? St. Mary's, right? And so we marched in, like I'll never remember. I think I was the one that like went first blown into like the president's office, and we marched in and we like told him about all of wanted the college to ensure that Sodexo, as their contractor, was living up to the LaSallian values, right, of social justice and equality for all. And so, it was really cool to be part of like that campaign, and be part of that like learning as a student, like how to like organize, like unionize, and like the power that comes with that, and like the changes that these, this union really meant for some of these, particularly the women that, at the time there was just some nasty folks. And there's a lot of allegations around, sexual harassment and just insensitive comments made to a lot of the women that work there. But then also just thinking about like labor, like, a lot of these workers worked in the same communities that many of the students, particularly students of color, came from. And so we resonated with them a lot as far as like, I would always like, oh, that's like my auntie or whatever it is. And so I think that was like one of the bigger campaigns. And I actually ended up working, it must have been, so this would have had to have been my junior year. No, my sophomore year. Sophomore year, because I remember my sophomore to junior, or and junior to senior. Um No, it would have been my juniors. Sorry, I'm like talking out, like trying to think because I remember I spent a summer working with the union, so it would have been my junior year. So I think I guess we would have been, but no, because all I need we unionized them when I was a junior because I remember some of the upper class they were seniors, but then I continued working and making sure that um the Sodexo workers had established like when you become a union, you have to have like a voice of or I forgot like a lead, right? And so that they knew how to become like good union representatives and when they talk to management. So we did that and I actually spent that summer unionizing some of the hotels and uh San Francisco and we did the golf course in Pleasanton. Like so there was a bunch of campaigns. We were kind of the catalyst. East Bay Sodexo's unionized before us did, but then we had Panoma and there was other like basically there was this almost like when you think about like national campaigns, it wasn't really national, but it was local to Unite here, and we were mobilizing, and then we would talk to other students from different colleges on like how we did it and how they can do it, right? And so it was really cool to be part of that larger, more societal thing, but really focused on St. Mary's and the work that we did because there was it was almost this kind of like so I was saying it was like a spies because like they I didn't start that it was like Lupin and other folks that were already kind of working with the union and then they would kind of like loop you in, right? Like I got brought in very early, so I was like one of the first like early students and then we would be like, okay, like so and so is also down. We could tell him the secret. But like we kept the secret for like 2 years or like we kept the like but it was just about building enough like allies to really and then we would bring in like a professor or like a brother and we got trained on essentially how to like unionize in secret. That's what I was like that's I keep saying like we were like spies. So that was really really cool and I think like for many many years it almost like was like a legacy thing of like the next group of incoming freshmen would be like, okay, these are like union, like, like if you ever want to be part of this, this is how you can be. And I know that like many students, like one of my mentees, Karen, she worked with the union for many years and she ended up becoming a lawyer, like specifically to help. So I think like that era of time and for the people that were involved in that campaign it really then influenced, what they ended up doing after St. Mary's, whether it was like internships over the summer with them, but also just like some people became full-time employees of that union, etc. And like being able to have that connection to St. Mary's was yeah, I think like that was really cool. But I think it's like one of those moments I remember like us like walking from the cafeteria to the pres like and just like the momentum and stuff. So yeah, I think that's my best response for the th third one. I was trying to like jog my memory when you sent this over on Friday. Um, I would say how did I feel like either witnessing students mobilizing or being part? I think there was this level of like empowerment because I think we did like the Occupy was really about like students and student conditions and like, access um to financial aid and there was a lot like just like access to resources, I think. And then there was this movement that was beyond me, right? It was impacting the lives of the people that took care of students for so long. I think that often, the cafeteria where people go in, they swipe their badge, they get their food, and like they leave. But it's like these are the people that are actually like taking care of us, and a lot of them, went above and beyond. And even in the spring of or I don't know if it was the spring of 2010, but it was part of like previous generations of SMC gals. Somebody that's actually being interviewed this semester, talked about starting the ESL teaching the Sodexo workers English, right? And so like during that era, I'm talking like late 2000s to like maybe 20, I don't know, 18 or something. Like there's like this huge group of students that were either teaching English, we're unionizing. Like there was just like a huge, there was a lot of us. And so I don't know, I think I think witnessing and seeing what other people were doing, but also being part of it and being a leader, I think there's like a level of pride, right? And that you did something that was more than yourself, right? Like, and hopefully something that was like a legacy for not only like the workers that were affected, but like future students, right? Knowing that um the college was living up to its Lasallian values, right? That people were being treated fairly, and hopefully some of those programs and those relationships continued with like future generations of students. So I think that brings like an immense amount of pride because I think it was just something that was like bigger than myself or bigger than conditions that affected me personally. Um, how do they respond? How did families and friends respond? Like, what are their students? I think that is interesting. At least I'll stick to the union part of it. I think that there was um students that were completely clueless. And, like they were like, what are they doing? What this isn't true or whatever. And so I think that there was that part of it. I think there's students who were like quick to like be like, "Oh, I'm joining in on this," and like march down to the president's office. I think that there was this um this like administration had to like reconcile. Like so, like hey, we talk about being Lasallian and doing all this and that, but like we're not even treating or having or the workers working for us aren't being treated. And so there was this like kind of reconciliation, I think, and a magnifying glass that like was kind of looking inward because I think what I'm pretty sure the day that we marched to the office of the president, we even contacted the news. So like I'll have to like look that up, but I'm almost like positive if I remember correctly that it was in the news. And so I think that there was this like um there was people that never even found out about it possibly. There's people that were like didn't know about it, but then were like really like receptive to it. And then there were people that were like, you know, this isn't true or whatever. And so I think there was a little bit of a gamut of that. I think that the faculty that supported this work was the same faculty that was always kind of sticking up their heads for students. And so that wasn't like surprising, but I think it was great that we had those faculty on campus and some of them still are there. Um, and I think that it also was like thinking about like Occupy SMC in connection to it. I think that there was this like um and I say this with like not factually knowing this, but I remember like maybe I don't know, like 6 years after I graduated or so, that St. Mary's was recognized as a HSI, so a Hispanic Servant Institute, which means that a certain percentage of your population is Latino or Hispanic. And so that was like, I feel like a lot of the stuff that we kind of set in motion with like the chapel, uh camping out on like in 2010 and like Occupy and all these kind of little things kind of set that to happen, right? So that was really cool to kind of reflect back, a couple of years later. I'm like, oh, I wish I went there when it was an HSI, or when at least statistically it was, right? Um, but yeah, I don't know. I remember telling my mom, sorry, I'm like jumping back and forth, but I remember telling my mom about all these things. And I think for like the longest, she was like, I don't know what she's doing, but like don't get in trouble. Like for some reason, like this always like equated to getting in trouble. And it was I'm trying to remember. There's like this book that I ever read, something about like I think it was even called Good Trouble. Like and I remember kind of being like, someone has to do this type of work. And so I was pretty bold, I think, when I was at St. Mary's. It didn't really care what happened to me as long as whatever I wanted or we wanted to protest or make happen. I think um maybe that's just who I am because I feel like I'm still like that. Like even working in corporate America, I'm always the one to be like, oh, actually. And so, yeah, I don't think like I mean, my friends were all with me doing it, at the time, but I don't think my family was just like, just don't get like they thought I was just kind of getting in trouble, and so I think, um, it was really like nice to like see even over the course of the years, like when they would like my professors or whoever would talk so highly of me that my parents like finally got it. Like, no, I wasn't like causing trouble. Like I was being a leader on campus, right? And so I think that there was even like a cultural thing of like maybe like in our culture you don't say nothing, you don't like, have eyes look at you. And that's what my parents were like, don't get in trouble, but when like I graduated or when we had like I was awarded a couple of different like um recognitions while I was there that I was able to invite my parents to. Um one of them was I don't know if do you guys still have the like Women in Resource Center? Okay, so there's an award um and they let me see if I can look it up. I think it's Um, so it's called the Catalina Torres Award. I don't know if they still do it, but she was a student at St. Mary's who had worked to and like worked in like domestic violence issues essentially, and she was killed in Martinez or yeah, it was Martinez, and she was killed by somebody's that she was like trying to help or whatever, right? So they started this whole program around Catalina Torres, and like there was one specific year that I actually got um an award that's named after her that St. Mary's gives for like student leaders, etc. So there was all these like, and that happened to me when Professor Marina got Professor of the Year. She dedicated her speech to me. And she talked about me. And so there was like a couple of instances over the course of the years that I was there that I was like either recognized or like received an award or whatever. Like, and so I think for me, like that was kind of like a testament that like I was doing good work or that, that what I was doing mattered. Um, so yeah, I think when my parents, I would be like, oh yeah, and I try to look for it, but I think that they like re redid the website, but like I actually had St. Mary's follow me over the course of my time there. I think I've been in the magazine like three times. Like one, I think I was like a sophomore, and they talked about some of the work that I did with Salsa. And then like when I moved to New York, right after they like sent a photographer, like a whole interview crew, I was like in like newspapers and stuff. And so those are the things that I wanted to share because I have some of them in person, like I can give you guys. My mom kept everything. But like those were the things that were like when my parents would see that, right? Or my family would see like, oh, why she's like in the school magazine and like blown up, or they like followed her to New York to see what she's up to, or like, we had a news reporter from I think it was was it the San Francisco Times? And like there was a couple of news articles. I'm sure I could probably still find those online, like the virtual copies, but like that it was in. And I think that's when my parents like realized like, oh, she's not just like up to no good or like everything that I would tell them, it wasn't really like they weren't clocking it like they were like it wasn't making sense what I was doing. They were just like nodding and they're like, okay. And those were the moments where like, oh yeah, like we're so proud of her and like like I'm telling you, like my mom kept the newspaper clippings, so it was like I think like that was their response, but I don't think initially they like understood why I was doing whatever I was up to because those are the kind of the big things that I remember, but I feel like I was always up to something. Um uh kind of going into like why, I mean, I don't know how much of what I've shared did you guys know happened at St. Mary's?
A,
'Cause
a
as
little
going to
bit.
question number six is like, why do you think your stories of resistance are not known? I'm like, I don't know. Did you guys know or not know? I don't know if they
Yeah,
are.
I think that like especially before taking this class, I didn't know almost any of the protests or stuff that had been going on because like none of my other classes kind of talk about this stuff. So through this class, I've learned a little bit more, but I'm sure there's a lot more that I still like what you brought up. I hadn't known a lot about, but then I'm sure there's even more than that. So there's a lot.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
didn't know a lot about the unionizing and the protests, but I kind of, oh, I didn't know the background, but the Tedesco's workers are like them protesting because they did have another protest recently with students. So like when you brought it up when you were protesting with the workers, I'm like, oh, we recently had protests just like that about like being paid higher, and it was like kind of towards fall semester. So when you were mentioning that, I'm like, oh wait, I feel like I've recently seen something, but it wasn't as big as what you're describing. It was like much a smaller group. So yeah, I didn't know any about this or the past. I thought this was all like new.
I would say, so to answer that question, I don't think, if I'm being like fully honest, I don't think people know because a lot of people didn't care. And I think that St. Mary's, while there's a kind of like a dichotomy of like being a student there and like the values and like the mission of the of the college, but also just like, I think what Professor Michael's doing with this class is like documenting, right? And like highlighting those leaders and really telling the stories like, you know, um, we know the MLKs and the Dolores Huertas and like, of these movements, right? But like organizing is happening every day in every space, right? Resistance is happening. And I don't think that for some people it's resistance and for some people it's survival. And I don't think like at the time that I was doing this, I don't think I was like saying like I'm gonna be a leader or I'm gonna be like, resisting. Like I think I was just trying to like survive in the conditions that we were in. And so it manifested into this like movement or movements, right? But I think like we were just doing what the right thing was to do. And I think that St. Mary's, because of the racial and the social economic, and often like there's like even some elitism that students come. I think that some people are like, this is like my everyday world. And then there's students that are completely oblivious to it. Like, and to no fault of their own. It's just like, and I think like, you know, I don't know how much, I mean, I'm sure you guys have learned about like microaggressions or things like that, but like I'll share a little bit more when we do the next interview of like what I've been doing now and stuff. But like sometimes I'll be in like spaces and I feel like I'm right back at St. Mary's. Like I'm the only Latina that's in that seminar room of like 20 students, and it's like super clear. And so sometimes like I will say something, I remember I'll say something in seminar because I have a very unique perspective that isn't like the norm perhaps. And sometimes my points would be like invalidated because people, or people couldn't see that, or maybe it wasn't that it was intentional, and I always like give people grace, but they couldn't see it from my perspective because they had never lived it, right? And so I think that when you ask, or when this question asks like why aren't these like stories known, or like what do you think other generations of students can learn from your experience, is that we all come from different perspectives. And so I think whether you agree on something or not, like I think that they're like it doesn't help you not knowing or not being curious, right? And so I think that like what people can learn is like curious like build like curiosity will help build bridges when there's different perspectives or different like life paths that people go on. And I think that, you know that's really cool that you guys are doing this project because hopefully, how cool would it have been to call, and I can call all the people that were part of the unionization to come support last fall, right? I just like, and I think because people don't know or like, when they were talking that day that we all went to campus and learned about what the previous semester had done with like the basketball walkouts and stuff. Like basketball is such a huge part of St. Mary's. It was when I was there at least, and I don't think it's we were. I remember the first time we went to the Sweet 16, I was a student there, so I feel like we've been there many times thereafter, right? But like. But I'm sure there's things that have happened, since then, right? And like what a platform St. Mary's and students and basketball players have at St. Mary's because of how beloved that program is. But imagine, and I'm not saying that they don't because I don't know, right? But if those basketball players nowadays use their platform to highlight some of their work, right? Or whatever platform it is, and I think like people there's that saying, I'm gonna like mess it up, but like you repeat history if you don't know it, right? Like history repeats itself. And so I think like the more we know about the stories and the things that have happened, like I think one, we can like prevent it from happening or we can hold accountability, particularly in this context of like holding the college, accountable to sometimes even like empty promises, dare I say it, or things that have been taken away because of budget cuts or whatever it may be, and just holding people accountable. And I think like I don't know, this kind of goes into like the next question of like advice or suggestions for students of this generation is like building those like connections with people that maybe don't have the same major as you or have the same, classes or live in this because there's like so much beauty in learning from people and like potentially like some inspiration. Like I'm when uh your professor reached out and shared that this class wasn't really made up of like typical ES students. And like what he meant by typical is like students who are majoring in ethnic studies or potentially even like in social sciences, right? Like anthro, because a lot of these classes overlap with one another. I was like, oh, like he goes, is that like, he goes, what do you think about that? I'm like, that's freaking amazing. That like more students are taking they could take any other class, but they're taking a class that's going to push them to think beyond, their realm of study, right? And I remember saying this the first time and kind of going into my little advice or suggestions is thinking about how it applies, like in any field, right? As I studied there and I was part of these different movements and how I've moved, I mean, I graduated 12 years ago now. 12 years ago, so that means I was a student 16 years ago and 2010, right? Um, I've been I was a teacher. I was in corporate. I mean, now I'm doing the consulting. Like I've moved around and I think that regardless of whatever field I was in, and I've spent eight, 8.5, almost 9 years in corporate tech. Like what I learned in ethnic studies or ethnic studies classes, like still follows me. And how I have to then like address like let's just say like my microaggression in the workplace. Looks very different than how you would maybe do it in a classroom, right? Um, and whether it's towards me or towards somebody else, right? Um, I have like the tools to like in the language to be able to address that like in real time and not like go talk about it. Like I think at St. Mary's we would like I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but we'd be like, go talk to your friends and like, and then it's just like, but now it's like, nope, I'm just gonna say it right then and there, or like take it to HR and like let me explain why that was, or address the person who said it and do it in a way that like is respectful, right? Of like people like maybe they didn't mean it that way, but like that doesn't change the impact of something, right? Just because we didn't mean it. Um, the microaggression still exists. And the feelings that people walked away from whatever that meeting that we were just in because you said something still exist, right? And so it's like this is how you can do better, or this is how you can change the way you say something, right? And feeling really comfortable for that. Um, but I also think like you, because I remember you're doing business, right, Oliver? Like accounting or
Finance.
finance,
Yeah.
and then you're like in engineering or did I get
Physics,
that
man.
right? Physics? Yes. And then Iris, forgive me, I forget what you're doing. I think
Yeah,
it's
I'm
business.
still, yeah, business too.
Okay, okay, cool, cool, cool. So I was like, I was like, I remember because I read all the stories or the personal, what did you guys personal narratives that you guys share, oral histories. Um, but like you're gonna enter these spaces and you might be the only one, or you might be the only one that, sees things different, right? And I think like we bear this responsibility as ethnic studies scholars, whether you major it and minor it, or you just took this one class, really to take everything that you've learned and apply it, and whether that's like unionizing or just saying like, hey, I'm in this finance tax audit thing, and why don't we have a association for, black tax professionals or whatever it is? We have it for these other, whatever it may be. I'm just like making that up. But like whatever it may be, it's like you have the tools and you have some understanding of like why it's important, right? And I would say like I say that to you guys because I'm talking to you, but to really any students to really be curious and like also just like use your voice as a platform and know that you're not always gonna have all the answers, but like I think like that curiosity and that like courage, right? Having courageous conversations is the way that I think we frame it now is like it's not about attacking somebody's perspective or um attacking them as a person for something that they've done or said. It's about having a courageous conversation with them and say, hey, have you thought about how what you said or what you did might impact a person from this background or whatever? Like, hey, like that, or even like for yourself, right? Like if no one's perfect. I've definitely been, um, had to learn, how to change how I frame things or how I remember one thing specifically. I used to always say like, oh, let's go have a powwow, like thinking like, oh, like let's just like hang out, right? And then I learned from an indigenous person what a powwow is, and I was like mortified that I was just saying it so casually, right? But it's like these things that sometimes you are used to saying, right? And so being able to like recognize that like everybody is able to grow and like evolve and like also being accepting that not everyone's on the same path. Like I think there was a part of particularly, I think like after I left St. Mary's, where I feel like I was just like mad, kind of like mad at the world or mad at like, of all the things that were happening. And how much time? We have until 3, right? I was like, okay because I'm gonna share this and you'll know why I was like mad and how it ties into St. Mary's. But I was like kind of mad, right? Like there was just all these things happening in the world, right? And it was part of why I went into education because I remember coming out of St. Mary's and feeling like I was not prepared for those 4 years and like why was I not prepared and like really thinking about um my my schooling, my K through 12 schooling and like as I took these classes and learned about the, how tax dollars influence how much funding schools get and this and like I remember I didn't even know what lacrosse was until I got to St. Mary's. I was like, what is like there was just all these sports like rugby like I'd never even heard of and so I was just like, I feel like I was just mad. And I was like, well, how am I going to fix this so that the next, and so that's actually why I ended up going to education. And so right after college, I went into education, but I remember I carried that like madness. And then I briefly mentioned how, how Professor Santiago she had got Professor of the Year. Pretty sure it was my senior year. So it would have been 2009, 2010. Or sorry, 2013, 2014. I remember, I can't remember. pretty sure it was my senior year. But I remember she started like, most people would like get this like really prestigious award and like I don't know, like thank their colleague. Well, I mean, she did a little bit of that, but she was also mad. Like I remember her being mad, and she wasn't like mad. She was mad at the fact that she was being recognized for and I guess I don't want to like misquote her, but this is how I remember. This is like kind of I remember her being really like troubled with the fact that she was like the first woman who had got professor or Chicana woman had got professor of the year award or whatever. And that like, they were like talking about her and her experiences in academia, etc. But she was like mad that nothing had changed. And so she started talking about this student and she started sharing like my story and my life story. And I'm sitting there and like everybody's like starts to bawl. And I'm like, I'm bawling right now because I remember I'm crying. I'm like, oh my God, she's talking about me. And at the end of her like speech, she obviously like came, she didn't never said my name because she didn't want to like out me to whatever, to everybody that was there. But she's like, and that student's like in this room. And I was bawling, so everybody kind of knew, like, oh, that was me. But one of the things that I had to go and God, it's just hard to talk about. One of the things that happened when I was a student at St. Mary's that ties into like just national things and society things and things that are even happening in today's world is my brother was deported. So my family, I mentioned in the first interview, was immigrant. They were undocumented. And so when I was a junior in college, my brother was taken from me. And it was really hard to do that when I was a student. And coincidentally, I was taking a class on immigration. And one of my classes that I ended up having to like withdraw from was about like immigration and immigrant and the history of immigration in the United States and all of that. Meanwhile, I was like like I would leave class and I would go to the courts. Or I would leave class and go visit him at the jail facility. And so I did that that whole semester like. And so I remember that speech because she talked about how there was this huge like divide in how students, particular and Latina women and all the things that came with the baggage that we had from our history, from our um, social economic, just being woman, just being Latinas, and so um I remember like that. So I guess this would have been, it had to have been my senior year when she got this award because she was talking about my brother and that happened my junior year. Um, and like that was a really traumatic part of my time there because I was losing, my family was getting split up. Meanwhile, I'm still like waking up every day and like having to go to school, having to work 3 jobs, and still trying to be like a student organizer or whatever it was. And I remember like when I graduated St. Mary's, like there was this like relief. And like I was just so mad. Like I was like upset that like I had gone through 4 years of hell, 4 years of also just like building like really great relationships and just feeling like so conflicted and like what am I gonna do now? Like, that's why I ended up getting, that was like the catalyst from kind of getting and trying to tie in my thoughts of like how I became an ethnic studies major. Because I was just mad. I think I was just like, I don't want to be here. I was like hopping around different like, majors or classes and just like not feeling like any of this like really mattered when I was, having to work 3 jobs to just pay for school, where like I was losing my family, where I was like all these different things that were happening in my like life and my personal life, yeah, like I have to sit and talk about the great books with people that don't even get it. Like, and and so I remember being like really, really upset. Um and I couldn't even tell you what I was just mad at. I just felt mad. I keep saying that, but it was this feeling um that I had, and it ties in, I think, a little bit into like the ethnic studies piece of it, because as I was going through this, I was also mad that I wasn't the only person, like that I wasn't the only, and that's actually what my thesis was about. Um, my thesis documented the stories of other Chicana students at St. Mary's. And so, and um, how we navigated kind of our personal home lives as it related to like our culture of being Latina and this liberal arts education school that we were in. And so my senior, and that was, I remember the coming out of junior year, and they're like, girl, what are you gonna graduate? Like you don't have a major. And then that's why after like, that semester with the immigration and like my brother, and that I was like, well, I'm gonna just do my own thing and I'm gonna become an ethnic studies major. And that was how that came about. But it was this like feeling that I had for those 4 years of being like, I've done so many things, and people like can credit a lot of things in law leadership to me, but like I'm still like that doesn't change anything for me, right? Like I'm still having to navigate all these things. And so um Totally, I went on a little rant. Sorry, I got a little emotional, but I remember that day so vividly that Professor Santiago had um was she was mad. Like I think she literally said that word. She goes, "I'm just mad," and everybody's like, "You just won the most prestigious award, and you're mad," And I was like, and so she's like, "I'm just upset that like." So much has changed, but like nothing at all, right? And so I kind of reflecting a little bit on like the questions that we went over today. I feel like it's upsetting sometimes to like hear like, I was like, oh, this happened or something similar happened, right? And like feeling like, okay, well, I was a student there, you know, over 10 years ago, and like experiences or even I was talking to one of your peers that are in this class that day. We just talked. She just stayed a little bit after and we talked, and she was telling me, and I'm like, oh my God, like you're like me all over again, And so I think like advice, if just to kind of finish that last question, I think like one, know your history, but also like do stuff like this, that like talk to alumni, talk to, your professors. There are a lot of professors that have been down for like movements and this type of work for a long time and carry so much knowledge. Like I'd be very curious if I'm gonna actually propose this to your professor, like to document the oral histories of some of the people that have been at that college for so long and that have seen generation after generation of students, because I think they carry um a more chronological like history of the college and from the different perspectives. And I know that just because I'm still pretty close to some of the professors um that work there. Some have now passed away and or retired, but for some of the ones that are still there, like, how hard it was to get, Latin American Studies program, and like how hard it is to get funding for certain things, like how hard it is, and it's like we invest so much in other things. Like I think you guys are getting like a new library, and there was like the new gym that I've never even seen. Like those things didn't exist when I was like that new gym that's like kind of at the entrance. Like that was something, but there's all these things, right, that we invest in, but like what are the like how are we investing in the experiences and of students of color, and the stories, etc. And so I don't know, I'm tangenting now, but I'll leave there. I'll shut up now. I don't know if you guys have further questions for me.
That was amazing. I really appreciate sharing. I just want to say I love your hat too. Big
Oh,
Valkyries fan. Yeah.
yes.
But yeah, that was amazing. Thank you. I don't know if Iris or Daniil, if you have any other extra questions.
I don't have any other questions, but I just liked Like I kind of understand when you feel about like being upset about the state of the school, then seeing how history is repeating itself and knowing your history. Because I feel like we've talked a lot about class about like not reinventing the wheel. Like sometimes students feel like they're reinventing the wheel and unionizing for the first time because we don't know the history. And yeah, it just makes me appreciate ethnic studies more. It makes me appreciate learning more about you too. Because like yeah, I had no clue I'm a business major. I don't think I would have ever known about the history or unionizing within St. Mary's if I didn't take this class. So I'm just like like really grateful and appreciative of your time you took today and just to tell your story.
Well, thank you.
Mhm.
I kind of had like a follow-up question slash comment. Um, like in terms of you being like the first ever ethnic studies major, like have you had a moment that's made you feel like, oh snap, like that, like I really made a difference?
I would say yes and no. Yes and no. I think that because and the reason why I say no is because I don't really know how when people say like, oh, like I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams. I don't know if you guys have ever heard like that quote or whatever, but I think that like who would have thought that like kids uh camping out on the chapel lawn and going on a hunger strike would have resulted into um a major, right? Or even a full-time staff. We had a full-time staff and then we had our first major and now we have a program. Like you all, when you applied, however many years you applied, you opened up your book, your book of majors and you saw ethnic studies, right? And it was just there, right? When I opened up that book, that didn't exist. The minor didn't even exist. And so you think about it's not just about like adding an extra page, right? Um and saying like, oh, we have this. No, it's about finding like the team, the professors, that have this knowledge and expertise and like scholarly background, right? It's about finding the right fit that will understand the student body and so I think like in those moments, um I'm really proud that it was like the first major and that like now students have that as an option because it was the only college. It's one of the only colleges at the time that didn't have it. Like when you look at all your like San Jose State, Berkeley, SF State, all these like colleges that like are peer colleges, they have those programs of study. And I know some schools are more known for certain, but like they have like it's the basics, right? Now they teach ethnic studies, at a high school level so the fact that we didn't have it and we were so far behind to like even like our peer, like that was like, like upsetting. So when I think about like if I would have never pursued like an ethnic studies major. And I mean, dare I say, like that was a form of activism, saying like, nope, we wanted it, we did it, I did it, here's how you can do it. Because I had to write when, like, I didn't just like, oh, I'm an ethnic studies major. No, like I had to petition, I had to go against the school board of the college to say like, this is my coursework and these are the professors that are gonna back me up. I had to take like one-on-one classes with professors to make this a thing. I had to like look at like I had to research the courses that other universities were doing, and I want to say I even took a class at a different university just to be able to like have enough credits to graduate and for my degree to be conferred and recognized. Um, so it wasn't just like, oh, I'm gonna do it, and it was like it was this level of organizing that I had to do, and then I had to like cross my fingers and hope that the School of Liberal Arts would recognize it, right? Because imagine going to school for 4 years and then your degree doesn't count for anything because it wasn't conferred. Like I don't now, you mean your programs of studies that you're all in, those are programs and you have an outline of like I didn't have that. So I had to make that up, right? And so it wasn't like I was the first because because it was in the book. I was the first because I made it. I made it up, right? And so seeing that my petition, I had to petition the School of Liberal Arts to agree that this could be a major, that I would do this, that I would have the backing of X, Y, and Z professors, that like they signed, it was like a paper that they had to sign and everything. So to have that um now just be something that you all kind of could open the book and it's like in there. I think that's a huge accomplishment, right? And so yeah, like did I have a moment? Like maybe not because I graduated and I'm kind of moved on, but then over the years, and I was still, I mean, at least for like the next three classes, 2015, 16, 17, like sometimes I would go back and like, oh, I'm going to their graduation or whatever. And then you had people that just had it as a major. Like, like it was just in like they did it or they changed their majors. Maybe they were a social major and it's like, oh, I'm gonna do ethnic or they minored. And so I had a lot of um mentees that like ended up pursuing that, right? And some of them have now decided to get a master's and et cetera. And so, like, I don't think I've ever credited their completion or like getting that degree to me specifically, but who knows how long it would have taken the college to then say like, oh, we're gonna make this a major because it didn't become. I did it, and I think it took a few. Still took like yeah, you have to ask your professor how when did it actually become a major? But then it became like, oh, we have a department. Like we actually have like a building where it's like ethnic studies and there's two professors and three or whatever, however it was, or these classes. Because up until that point, there was only one class and it was Intro to Yes, like 101 or whatever it was. And there was only one class that was ethnic studies. Everyone was by Professor Kikala. He's no longer at the college anymore. Everything else was like cross-listed, right? And so now I'm sure like even this class, this isn't Intro to Ethnic Studies or whatever. I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't know. But there's other classes that are like ethnic studies. And so I think like so many people put so much work into that after I even graduated to like make it a thing. But I think that I don't know, I guess the foundation or like the precedent was set by the work that I had done as a student to make that happen. And I do have a little placard that says first ethnic studies major in the history of in the 150th anniversary or history of the college. So I do have that. And I had the ta like I had my what are they called? The tassels or whatever. Like in mine says ethnic studies and nobody else had that. And guess what? I had to make my own. Like I had to like literally go order my own and like customize it or whatever. But like now people can do that, right? Like it's just like a thing, right? That wasn't a thing with me.
Maybe it'd be great if you could send us like pictures of those things or something like that. That's something I was going to add on. Like any sort of our teacher calls them artifacts or any sort of information you have. Like I think something that would be really cool is for us to try and find like we can do some research for it too, but to try and find like that when you were on the news with Sodexo going to the president's office, something like that, or like the articles following you.
Yeah, I sent a couple, hold on. I have some of the links handy.
Hmm.
Because I remember when I was talking to Professor Viola about this, like just months ago,
Hmm.
and before you guys even started the semester, because he was like, "Hey, oh, this is another thing I'd say." Because the re how I met Professor Viola was probably like in maybe like 2021. They had this is where David was still there. They had the first ever ethnic studies symposium. I'm sure you can ask him about it, but there should be recordings and pictures. But it was myself, Hernan, who was like one of the people that was on the screen when one of the basketball players, and there was a couple of others that talked about ethnic studies and stuff. But it was the first time that they had like a conference for ethnic studies at the college. So I was a speaker there. So that's where we first like where he how he learned about me, right? But the reason why I say that is I sent him because I was trying to be like, oh, you should also talk to this person and Melena and a couple, and that's how some of the other people are there, and I've sent him a list of now other students, right? But I did send him, let's see. I know I had the article because I sent him. This is one of them. Let me just drop it here. But I definitely have other things from St. Mary's. I wanted I have to bring some of them. But in that picture that I just sent in that link, that was from I mean that was 2013. So yeah, that would have been my junior year. That we unionized them, the spring of my junior year. Because I graduated in 2014. Um, but yeah, like I'm the one with the little blue triangle thing in that picture. And I think I'm even quoted in that article, but there's a couple other ones um that I can share with you guys um of my time there. If you can do some digging, but I can also do some digging because I know that the SMC article, this is actually homework for you guys. I don't know if in the library they keep the like copies of the magazines because that's where you would find some of this stuff. I know that like I'll send you a link like this because when you look at it online, it doesn't give you the full article. It just gives you snippets of it because I think that the links have been moved or whatever. But you like here's like East Bay Times. See, there's another one that just came up with my name. And I think my dog's in this picture. Let me see. Oh wait, it's not this one. Maybe. I'm pretty sure it was this one. Oh, I think this one's blocked. I'll see. I think this is the one that my mom has in her one of the articles. It was the East Bay Time, but there is I was in this article because I think this is the one that my is a picture of my dog with me. But I'll find a couple of other ones, but I'm pretty sure either my mom has them or I have them somewhere. But there's definitely a lot of things if you look up my name and look up St. Mary's that will potentially come up. Unless they've been like the links have been now like broken. It's been a long time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I think that I'm sure Professor Vila will send you something, but eventually, after we finish our whole website and everything, he's going to set a date for him to invite all of the interviewees to come and then
hmm
have like a final like lunch and look through everything. So when we find out the date, I'll definitely send that over to you.
Okay, cool. Cool. Anything else for today, or I'm looking forward to talking to you guys on Friday again.
Mhm. I think that's it for today. I'll send you the questions, the third round of questions before Friday again too.
Yeah. You
Mhm.
know what's so funny?
Mhm.
I don't know if AI is so weird.
Mhm.
If you look up, I just typed in St. Mary's College, Brenda Martinez, and then I put Catholic
Mhm.
because I was trying to look up an article. There's an AI overview of me, which is kind of weird. Um, but yeah,
Is it
yeah,
accurate?
yeah, it literally says it was like who graduated in 2014 as the very first ever ethnic studies major advocating for the program. She notably worked at homeless advocacy in San Francisco, which is true, and supported dining hall workers union. That's so weird. I'm wondering where they got all
Mhm.
this. Like, if you like literally type that in, there's links to other things that mention me, which is because I'm telling you that Real World 101, which is like St. Mary's Magazine, they covered me a couple of times. So if they're pulling from that, but yeah, this is pretty accurate. Um, so anyways, just I'm just putting that out there. If you literally Google St. Mary's College and then Brenda Martinez, and I put Catholic because there's another Brenda Martinez that's like an athlete. I was not an athlete, so don't. And she didn't go to St. Mary's, but I think maybe she went to another college that has like St. Mary's in it or something. So sometimes they get, but I am not the runner. I'm not a track star. But yeah, if you look it up, you'll find you'll that's so weird. But there's this particular article that I was trying to find. I'll see if I can find it. If not, I'm sure that I have like some of the copies of it that I'll definitely want to share with you guys at some point. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
talk to you
thank you
guys
so much.
Friday.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. How's that? I'm curious though. I know because semester's coming to an end, right? Like,
Mhm.
what's this process like? And so you guys are like doing the interviews, you gather, any additional things, but
Mhm.
what is kind of like your deadline or how are you guys like tracking towards that?
So this week we're supposed to be done with our interviews, so we're on
Okay.
track for that. And then next week we start. Professor Viola's niece is designing the website that's going to have all of the interviewees like a different web form for each interviewee, and then we kind of design that how we want it, and then have all sorts of documents, and then kind of transcribing your story in a way that like not necessarily like word for word quotes, but
Yeah.
kind of just here and there talking about your story St. Mary's before and after, kind of just
Hmm.
something like that.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I just want to make sure because I know we had a little like just with timelines, but I'm
Hmm.
definitely and then obviously if there's like follow-ups and stuff, I can
Yeah,
make myself available for
cool.
next week or whatever, however you guys, I'm pretty flexible. But yeah, excited to talk about if you can share the questions though, maybe today so I could just
Mhm.
like browse at them and be ready for
Yeah,
Friday. But definitely excited to talk about kind of what I've been up to since then.
totally.
Yeah. Awesome. Bye, you
All right.
guys.
Thank you
Thank
so
Bye.
much.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.